Hello everybody, welcome to the channel where we talk about everything from the weird and wacky to the educational and downright preposterous. Today we're going to be finishing up our Greed, Crime, and the NFL Iceberg. This will be the last video in a 3-part series, so if you haven't seen parts 1 or 2, I highly recommend them. You should probably go check those out first. Today we're going to be on tier 6 of the Iceberg, and before we jump in, I do want to give a discretionary warning. This will cover topics that involve sexual assault, and sex crimes. If that is something that can trouble you or trigger you, please don't feel obligated to watch this video. You and your mental health are more important than any sort of view count number or anything on this video. So please be responsible and take care of yourselves first and foremost. Tier 6 starts off with Kevin Allen, who is known as a professional American football player whose position was that of a tackle. His career consisted of playing for the Philadelphia Eagles, though he only lasted a single season. This was due to being cut as his performance was severely lackluster for the team. That and with cocaine charges against him, Allen wasn't long for the league. Shortly after being cut, Allen, along with his roommate Scott Cartwright, were charged and sentenced for rape. Allen received a 15-year sentence, but only served 33 months in prison. At the time, he received a lifelong ban from the league, which was later lifted. Trevone Boykin made his way onto the Seattle Seahawks after becoming an undrafted free agent. Playing as quarterback for the Seattle Seahawks in 2016, he was listed as a backup for Russell Wilson. Playing a few regular games, Trevone was less than stellar in his performance and was later let go due to domestic violence allegations. However, Trevone had quite the criminal record by the time his release took place, having punched an officer, carried marijuana, being publicly intoxicated, and he would even go on to assault some of his family members. However, the worst instance was when Trevone assaulted his girlfriend at the time, consequently breaking her jaw. As a result, Trevone was given a 3-year prison sentence. Thomas Henderson was selected in the first round of the 1975 NFL Draft, being the 18th pick overall. Playing as a linebacker for the Dallas Cowboys during his rookie season, Henderson focused on special teams. In 1978, he helped win a Super Bowl for his team by scoring a touchdown. Throughout his entire career, Henderson suffered from severe drug addiction, even keeping an inhaler with liquid cocaine in his pants, which he'd use during games. Despite this, Henderson continued to play and was signed by many teams due to his talent, regardless of the drug issue. Aside from substance abuse, Henderson was arrested in 1983 and charged with 2 counts of false imprisonment and 1 count each of forced oral copulation. Oral copulation is defined as the non-consensual act of forcing contact between someone's mouth and anus or other genitalia. Additionally, Henderson faces sexual battery charges along with furnishing cocaine to a minor. Some allegations state that the crimes were committed while Henderson was in possession of a gun. Ultimately, Henderson was arrested when a 15-year-old girl made allegations that she and a 17-year-old paraplegic wheelchair-using girl were lured by Henderson to his apartment. The youngest girl stated to police that Henderson pulled out a gun and threatened her into having sex with him, where he then went on to assault both girls while threatening to kill them. After finding a .38 caliber gun along with drug paraphernalia in Henderson's apartment, he attempted to defend himself by stating that he'd provided both girls with drugs in exchange for consensual sex. Regardless of this, I hope everyone here understands that there is no consent to sex from anyone under the age of 18 with a grown adult, let alone one who is brandishing a gun saying, "I am going to kill you if you do not sleep with me." That kind of defense is used quite often by sexual predators who attempt to gaslight others into believing their own twisted sexual fantasy. A fantasy where the victims wanted to have sex regardless of the circumstances. Eventually pleading no contest to the charges, Henderson was sentenced to 4 years and 8 months, where he only served 28 months in total. Records state that Henderson has been clean and considered an upstanding citizen since his release. Dave Meggett played 10 seasons in the NFL, primarily as a return specialist. A prominent figure in his position, he aided in the Giants winning Super Bowl 45. To this day, Meggett is second in the league for punt return yards. Aside from being famous for his NFL career, Meggett is also well known for having 9 children with 8 different women, along with his extensive criminal history. In 1990, Meggett was charged with soliciting a prostitute, though the charges were eventually dropped. In 1995, Meggett was charged with assaulting his girlfriend at the time, but like before, the charges were dismissed as the judge believed that the girlfriend was the aggressor. Now, it is possible that this is true, as many women have and can abuse men. However, I do take it with a grain of salt considering his other crimes. In 1998, Meggett was arrested for presumably assaulting an escort after he'd had a three-way sexual encounter. In 2006, Meggett resigned from his current job as a Parks and Rec director after claims were made that he'd sexually assaulted a former girlfriend. This led to a conviction in 2007 for sexual battery, though he only received 2 years of probation. In 2009, Meggett was then arrested for robbing and raping a part-time student at the College of Charleston. At long last, Meggett actually received punishment for his crimes because in 2010 he was convicted of burglary and criminal sexual misconduct, leading to a 30-year sentence that he is still serving. Given the extent of his criminal history, it's easy to get lost, so I'll break things down for you. Meggett was on the Giants from 1989 to 1994. This means that when allegations of soliciting a prostitute in 1990 were released, he was still employed. Meggett was then on the New England Patriots from 1995 to 1997, meaning that allegations of assault on his former girlfriend were during this time of employment in the NFL. Meggett then moved on to the Jets in 1998, where he faced charges for assaulting an escort. It was only after the season that the Jets opted not to re-sign him, which means he still collected a paycheck from the league and team despite his recurrent violence against women. Lawrence Phillips played 3 seasons in the NFL as a running back, where he had an unimpressive career due to legal troubles. The first major incident regarding Phillips occurred in 2005 when Phillips intentionally ran into 3 teenagers with his car. This was due to a dispute he'd had with them during a pickup game of football. At this time, Phillips was wanted in San Diego for 2 domestic violence cases with a former girlfriend who claimed he choked her until she'd fallen unconscious. At this time, Los Angeles police were also looking for Phillips in relation to another domestic abuse case. While Phillips served time for his charges, he became a prime suspect in the murder of his cellmate, but hung and killed himself before charges could be filed. This lands Phillips in Tier 6 instead of Tier 7. As I did more digging into his criminal history, I learned that during Phillips' time on the Rams, he was battling substance abuse issues with alcohol. Upon release from the Rams, he was given to the Dolphins, as Phillips' coach called in a favor to keep Phillips' career intact. To this day, Coach Vermeil says he would have done things differently and kept Phillips on the Rams roster instead of passing him off to Coach Jimmy Johnson for the Miami Dolphins. With a career intact despite clearly needing help and rehabilitation, Phillips was released from the Dolphins only after another assault incident occurred at a nightclub. In all, Phillips' complete list of charges landed him 31 years in prison. He only served 7 years before he killed himself. Salim Rasheed played as a linebacker in the NFL for the 49ers, though he saw little playing time due to injury. In fact, Rasheed only played 45 games in his career with the NFL and later the Canadian Football League. After his unimpressive football career, Rasheed went on to coach and teach at Irwin High School. In 2012, Rasheed was charged with food stamp fraud and falsifying documents. Later, Rasheed was charged with immigration fraud after marrying a Moroccan woman and then marrying an American woman for citizenship without divorcing his first wife. Then in 2013, Rasheed was sentenced to 3 years in prison after having sex with 2 students while teaching at Woodlawn High School in Birmingham, Alabama. While both students were legal and of age, it's illegal to have sex with a student in the state of Alabama. Also, given the power dynamic, authority, and possible manipulation at play, it's difficult to blame the students, even if they consented and were of age. An adult such as Rasheed should never be sleeping with anyone freshly 18, regardless of circumstances. Darren Sharper played in the NFL for 14 seasons as a safety, leading to a Super Bowl win for the Saints, being that of Super Bowl 44. On top of a Super Bowl win, Sharper set a couple of NFL records. For instance, the most interception return yards in a season being that of 376 yards. However, away from the NFL, Sharper was a very dangerous man, willing to hurt a lot of people. In 2011, 2 women filed a criminal complaint against Sharper after they claimed to have been sexually assaulted. The story goes that both women were brought over to Sharper's residence from a nightclub and passed out on the couch, drugged from some type of substance. One of the women woke up to a man attempting to put his penis in her mouth. She passed out again shortly after and woke up again to a man removing her dress. The third time she woke up, she noticed that both her underwear and her companion's underwear were missing. Both women underwent examinations and rape kits, but there is no evidence to indicate that the kits were ever sent out for testing or that Sharper was ever questioned regarding the crimes. Both women were horribly failed by the police of Miami Beach. In 2013, Sharper went on to drug a woman who was working as a model at a pre-Super Bowl party in New Orleans. After she was drugged, Sharper's friend Brandon Alicia raped the woman. Later, in the same year of 2013, Sharper is said to have raped another woman in New Orleans. 2 months later, Sharper drugged and raped 2 women with an accomplice, Eric Nunez. 1 month after this particular incident, Sharper drugged 2 women and raped one of them in Los Angeles. Less than a month after that, Sharper met 3 women from ASU, drugged and raped 2 of them. In 2014, Sharper committed 2 other separate incidents of rape. To give you a better understanding of just how much Sharper escalated in his behavior, the following is a timeline with each distinct date and incident. March 18th, 2011. February 2nd, 2013. August 31st, 2013. September 23rd, 2013. October 30th, 2013. November 20th, 2013. January 14th, 2014. January 15th, 2014. And to be clear, each woman who was assaulted reported the incident to police, and most of them underwent rape kits and examinations. After all was said and done with each individual trial in each state, Sharper was given a 20-year sentence. All of this could have been prevented had police properly handled the very first incident that was given to them and sent the rape kit off for testing. Alonzo Spellman was drafted to the Chicago Bears in the first round of the 1992 NFL Draft as the 22nd overall pick, primarily a defensive lineman playing 123 games throughout his career. Successful on most of the teams he played for, Spellman suffered from bipolar disorder. Now, to be clear, I sympathize with Spellman suffering from an intensive mental illness. However, mental illness is never an excuse for the crimes you commit. It can be a cause or an underlying factor, but it does not excuse the behaviors. It's also important to note that I sympathize with Spellman regarding his mental illness due to the fact that resources are hard to come by if you don't know where to start or how to ask for help. Given his crimes, it's clear that the people around him failed him, and he also failed himself as he did not aid in his mental well-being by continuing his day-to-day routine without seeking assistance. That said, Spellman's criminal career began July 23, 2002, when he suffered a manic episode while at an airport. He went on to verbally abuse and accost a flight staff and passengers, leading to an emergency landing. Then in January 29, 2008, Spellman led police on a chase after an altercation at Tulsa, Oklahoma. Spellman was arrested again on November 2, 2015, after being stopped for multiple outstanding warrants. Overall, Spellman's charges include eluding police, interference with a flight crew, and assault. He served a 1-year prison sentence. C.J. Spillman was signed as an undrafted free agent to the Chargers in 2009. Being an unimpressive player for the Chargers, Spillman was then signed over to the 49ers, where he established himself as a successful safety/special teamer. On October 2, 2014, Spillman fell under investigation for sexual assault. Despite this, Spillman, who was signed by the Cowboys at this time, was still allowed to play and participate on the team. But that's fine, because he was only removed from the team after the season was over. Because it's okay to still have a job despite sexually assaulting someone if you can play football. As for punishment regarding the crime, Spillman was sentenced to 5 years. Dana Stubblefield was drafted in the first round of the 1993 NFL Draft as the 26th overall pick to play as a defensive tackle. Playing for the 49ers originally, Stubblefield won a plethora of accolades during his time in the NFL, including a Super Bowl championship. Despite having a plethora of success on the field, it was revealed that Stubblefield not only supplied but also used performance-enhancing drugs. Additionally, Stubblefield went on to be charged with sexual assault in 2016 while out of the league. The story behind the assault is that Stubblefield sexually assaulted a disabled woman who was 31 years of age at the time. Stubblefield reportedly contacted the victim through a babysitting website. By promising the woman a babysitting job, Stubblefield successfully lured her to his home where he forcibly raped the woman, performed oral copulation by force, and falsely imprisoned her after she was lured. As a result of the crime, Stubblefield was given a sentence of 15 years to life. Nate Webster was a linebacker drafted in the third round of the 2000 NFL Draft to the Buccaneers. Webster's biggest career highlight is that he won a Super Bowl championship. However, Webster's criminal career began even before he was in the NFL. While he was still playing college ball at Miami, Webster was arrested for false imprisonment after he grabbed Natalie Brandy, an ex-girlfriend, by the throat, threw her onto the ground, and then shoved her into a car that he and a friend were riding in. Charges were dropped regarding this case as Webster went through a diversion program. However, in my opinion, the fact that he was even allowed into the NFL at all after such a horrific incident is beyond me, regardless of any diversion program. Especially because in 2011, Webster was indicted for sexual battery, gross sexual imposition, as well as 5 counts of sexual contact with a minor. The charges themselves state that Webster had repeated sex with a 15-year-old girl that was the daughter of former assistant coach for the Bengals, a team he played on. Reports state that Webster used guns to intimidate the girl into having sex and keeping their relationship a secret. He even stated that he would kill her along with her family if she told anyone about what was going on. At the time of his arrest, Webster was working as a coach at Bellevue High School. So clearly whatever diversion program he went through didn't work, as he lacks any sort of respect for women of any age. As for punishment, Webster was sentenced to 12 years. Kellen Winslow II was drafted to the Cleveland Browns as the 6th pick overall in the 2004 NFL Draft, where he played as a tight end. While playing for a series of teams during his career, Winslow would also go on to commit a series of crimes, starting with drug possession in 2014. In 2018, Winslow was charged with first-degree burglary after fleeing a trailer park. Later in 2018, Winslow went on to be arrested for kidnapping and rape. The charge states that Winslow managed to kidnap and rape 2 women. At this time, Winslow was placed on house arrest with a GPS after posting a $2 million bail. In a separate case around this time, Winslow was charged for raping an unconscious 17-year-old girl in 2003 while he was 19. This would have been during his collegiate career, which again makes me wonder how and why he was ever allowed into the NFL to begin with. Winslow went on to commit further sexual crimes as well as battery pertaining to senior citizens. One specific charge in 2019 was that Winslow raped an unconscious teenager and also committed sexual battery on a 54-year-old hitchhiker. These were 2 charges he pled guilty to in order to receive a plea deal. In all, Winslow received a 14-year sentence despite his extensive history of rape and violence. Heath Wright was drafted as the last pick in the 6th round of the 2003 NFL Draft to play as a defensive tackle. Overall, his career was incredibly unimpressive, where he started with the Texans as a practice squad member and finished with the Detroit Lions. Overall, Wright's criminal career was worth more weight than his NFL career. On July 21st, August 8th, and August 21st of 2011, Wright committed 3 separate home invasions. Each invasion followed the same pattern of threatening homeowners with a gun, demanding money and property. During one of the home invasions, Wright sexually assaulted, kidnapped, and forced a female victim to drive him to 2 different banks in an attempt to withdraw money. During a search of Wright's home, property from each victim was found within his house. He was also linked to the sexual assault case via DNA. While I wish I could elaborate more on his criminal record, many of the articles I found state the following. Wright was ultimately found guilty of 19 charges, including armed robbery, kidnapping, forced oral copulation, first-degree burglary, and false imprisonment. Due to the severity and extent of his criminal record, Wright was given a 234-year prison sentence. This is the longest prison sentence for an athlete in history. Ray Rice played as a running back for the Ravens after being elected by the team in the 2nd round of the 2008 NFL Draft. Rice was a very successful player, helping the Ravens win their Super Bowl championship in 2012. However, in 2014, Rice and his at-the-time girlfriend, now wife, were both arrested at Revel Casino in Atlantic City due to domestic violence. The incident occurred after both Rice and Palmer had too much to drink. They began to yell obscenities at each other, and Palmer then spit in Rice's face, leading to him punching her. A video shows the two getting into a physical altercation in an elevator where they began to hit each other. While the charges were ultimately dropped after Rice agreed to undergo court-supervised counseling. I'm keeping Rice on this list because there is no doubt that the crime was committed due to video evidence. Due to the incident, the NFL only suspended Rice from 2 games, though they later terminated him. This led Rice to file a lawsuit against the NFL for wrongful termination since they already punished him by a 2-game suspension. As far as I'm concerned, they should have fired him first instead of offering a suspension given the brutality of the domestic violence and assault incident. However, that's not what happened, and Rice was given a large payout from the NFL and an undisclosed settlement. Now, to be clear, Palmer did go on to marry Rice, and I believe they are still together. Regardless, man or woman, married or not, neither individual should have hit the other. It's inexcusable to ever lay a hand on your partner, regardless of gender, popularity, occupation, or anything of similarity. Do not, ever, touch your partner, violently, physically, and without permission. Aaron Kromer is the offensive line coach for the Buffalo Bills. In 2015, Kromer had a run-in with the law where he and his son Zachary got into an altercation with the neighbor's son. The neighbor's son is notably a minor. The neighbor's son, along with 2 other boys, were in the process of using Kromer's beach chairs without asking. Angered, Kromer grabbed one of the boys' fishing poles and threw it into the water. He then reportedly shoved one of the boys down onto the ground and punched him in the face. He then demanded that they return the chairs. A filed police report states that bodily harm was done to the boy's left eye. On top of assaulting the boy, Kromer went on to threaten his victim, stating that he'd kill the boy's family if the boy reported him to police. Kromer's son Zachary stayed behind while his father went home to try and help the boys locate their fishing pole, before also returning back to his residence. Ultimately, Kromer was suspended for 6 games, and 2 weeks later, charges were dropped, though there's no disclosed reason as to why. In many instances, I would remove Kromer from the Iceberg as he technically wasn't found guilty of assault. However, the boy's eye injury is documented, proving the assault did in fact happen, regardless of dropped charges. It's a similar instance to Ray Rice. Evidence clearly indicates that the crime happened regardless of guilt found in court. Unfortunately, because the charges were dropped, Kromer continued his career in the NFL, where he was promoted to game coordinator for the Rams, who he worked for at the time. That closes out Tier 6. Now we will move on to Tier 7, which handles manslaughter, murder, and attempted murder. Josh Brent was signed in the supplemental draft to the Dallas Cowboys after being ineligible academically in his senior year of college, meaning he couldn't play. With a pretty successful start for the Dallas Cowboys, Brent outperformed an injured teammate, making him a starting defensive tackle. However, Brent's career came to a screeching halt when he was driving intoxicated and above the speed limit. Hitting a curb, the car flipped, leading to the death of his teammate, Jerry Brown, and charges of manslaughter. Due to the crime, Brent served 180 days in prison and was given a 10-year probation period. Dwayne Goodrich played for the Dallas Cowboys from 2000 to 2002 as a cornerback, where he played a total of 16 games. His career was riddled with injuries, leading to a rather unimpressive resume. Even worse, Goodrich was responsible for a severe hit-and-run that left 2 people dead. Those who died were attempting to save a man from a burning car. Goodrich was reportedly going 100 miles per hour when striking the side of the burning car at anywhere between 54 miles an hour to 80 miles an hour. Being convicted on 2 counts of criminally negligent homicide, Goodrich was given a 7-year sentence in order to pay a $20,000 fine. Aaron Hernandez was drafted in the 4th round of the NFL Draft of 2010 to play for the New England Patriots as a tight end. Despite being relatively successful, very few people in the league and on the Patriots liked Hernandez, who is reported to be rather abrasive. As for his legal issues, they go way back to college. In 2007, Hernandez went to a bar with Team Tebow, had a couple of drinks, refused to pay his bill, and while being escorted out, sucker punched the employee in the side of the head, rupturing their eardrum. Hernandez was 17 at the time. The incident was settled with an out-of-court deferred prosecution. Later in 2007, in Gainesville, Florida, a double shooting took place. The story goes that a stranger approached a car stopped at a light that contained Randall Carson, Justin Glass, and Corey Smith. In all, 5 shots were fired. Of the people in the car, Smith and Glass were both shot. Glass sustained an injury to the back of his head, while Smith sustained an injury to the arm. Both men survived their injuries, and Carson ultimately picked Hernandez out of a lineup for police as the man who'd shot at them. Hernandez had recently left a club at the time of the crime. Later, it was revealed that Hernandez was not the triggerman in the shooting and may not have been involved at all. Carson even went so far as to rescind his statement, stating that Hernandez was the shooter. The reason I include this statement at all is because some people still speculate that Hernandez may have had a hand in the shooting in some way, even if he didn't pull the trigger, especially since he and Carson had gotten into a disagreement at the club earlier. However, I want to make it clear that no official charges were ever brought to Hernandez regarding this incident, and he was never convicted of the crime. This is all external speculation from people who followed Hernandez's career and criminal history. In 2011, Hernandez got into a fight in the front of his rented home in Massachusetts. When police responded, they found Hernandez in the passenger seat of his friend's car. The car had reportedly been speeding and dangerously weaving in and out of traffic. When the high school friend driving Hernandez was pulled over and officers recognized Hernandez, they didn't arrest either individual and instead told them to just go inside. In 2013, Hernandez was a person of interest in a double homicide within Boston. Long story short, Hernandez was acquitted of the charges, though he was found guilty for the illegal possession of a handgun. Also in 2013, Hernandez, along with a friend named Bradley, were pulled over again due to being intoxicated and speeding. Bradley was ultimately arrested, but Hernandez tried to get his friend out of trouble by stating, "Officer, I am Aaron Hernandez. It's okay." Throughout 2013, there were a few more incidents regarding Hernandez that either ended in dropped charges, protection from police, or a not guilty verdict in court. The only other crime in 2013 that remains particularly significant is when Hernandez was charged with first-degree murder along with 5 gun-related charges in regard to the death of Odin Lloyd. Only when charges were officially filed against Hernandez in this case did the Patriots drop him. His former assault charges, drug usage, illegal possession of a firearm, and protection from police were enough to not only bar him from entering the NFL, but from being removed from it entirely. Convicted and charged with first-degree murder, Hernandez was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He ultimately killed himself while incarcerated. Before I move on to the next person on our iceberg, I want to note that there is a Netflix documentary discussing Hernandez's troubled past and life. It's been a few years since I watched it, and I don't remember much other than the fact that it was eye-opening and gave you a really good deep dive into his criminal history and some of the things that he went through, so I highly recommend it. Tommy Kane played in the NFL for 4 years as a wide receiver for the Seattle Seahawks. Scoring only 9 touchdowns in his career, Kane was relatively unimpressive as far as success goes in the NFL. However, like Hernandez, his criminal history goes back to college. For instance, in 1988, while at Syracuse University, he assaulted a police officer that was trying to tow his illegally parked car. Because of this incident, Kane was charged with second-degree assault, second-degree obstructing governmental administration, and resisting arrest. He was given a sentence of community service as punishment. Surprisingly, assaulting a police officer and resisting arrest did not prevent Kane from entering the NFL. This wasn't the end of his criminal history, which escalated dramatically in 2003 when he beat and stabbed his estranged wife, who was 35 at the time. Kane's estranged wife, Tamara Sheikh, died in the arms of a church counselor. Originally charged with second-degree murder, Kane pled down to manslaughter, as many were unsure if he intended to kill his wife. He was sentenced to 18 years in prison. Leonard Little played all 12 years of his NFL career with the St. Louis Rams as a defensive end, earning himself and the team a Super Bowl win. Unfortunately, his career was tainted when he crashed into and killed Susan Gutweiler in St. Louis, Missouri, while she was on her way to pick up her son from a concert. When tested, Little's blood alcohol level was 0.19, which is 0.11 above the legal limit of 0.08. Ultimately, Little was charged with involuntary manslaughter, which is an incredibly light charge considering he chose to drive while intoxicated. Following the incident, Little had further problems with substance abuse, but managed to retain his career in the NFL with the Rams despite killing somebody. In fact, he only served 3 months in prison, which seems a little light in my opinion. Eric Naposki played in the NFL from 1988 to 1997 as a linebacker, starting on the New England Patriots and ending with the New York Jets. His career then persisted outside of the NFL with the Barcelona Dragons. Despite such a long career in the NFL, Naposki only played 5 games. Naposki's criminal history begins in 1994 while he was part of the New England Patriots. The millionaire William McLaughlin, who made his money through investments, was murdered in his Newport Beach home. Naposki shot William to death with the help of William's live-in girlfriend, Nanette Johnston, who happened to be Naposki's secret lover. This was all a scheme for Johnston to collect $2.5 million from William's life insurance policy. Now, while I want to condemn the NFL for allowing Naposki to participate in the league after this crime, I can't, because the case went unsolved for 15 years, meaning Naposki wasn't even a suspect while he was still playing football. In fact, Naposki and Johnson were charged until 2009, where they were found in California. Both Johnson and Naposki were convicted of first-degree murder and were given a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. Robert Rozier had a brief stint in the NFL as a defensive end, though he's more notorious for his affiliations with the religious group the Nation of Yahweh, which was a group that believed blacks were the true Jews of God. In order to join a super-secret group of men within the Nation of Yahweh, who went on secret missions, Rozier had to kill random white devils. As a result of this initiation, Rozier followed a drunk white man home where he killed the man along with his roommate with a 12-inch Japanese knife. Later in the same year, Rozier, along with another Brotherhood member of the Nation of Yahweh, killed an unconscious 61-year-old Raymond Kelly. Kelly was parked in a parking lot. Here, Rozier and his companion cut off one of Kelly's ears to show to their leader Ben Yahweh that the killing was complete. Ironically, Rozier lost the ear. This caused him and his companion to return to a deceased Kelly to remove his other ear as proof of death. A mere 15 days later, Rozier, along with 3 other Yahwehs, killed 45-year-old Cecil Branch by stabbing him 25 times. This was due to a confrontation Rozier had with Branch previously. Rozier was ultimately arrested for the 4 murders. However, he testified against Ben Yahweh, earning himself a relaxed sentence, serving 10 years and being placed in witness protection. In truth, I could go on about Rozier and the Nation of Yahweh, but I won't. I may, however, investigate the cults more in another video. Anthony Smith was drafted 11th overall in the 1990 NFL Draft to the Raiders, where he played as a defensive end. Recording 57.5 sacks in his career, Smith played a total of 98 games throughout his 8-year stint in the NFL. Smith's NFL career officially ended in 1998, and his criminal career began in 2003, where he was charged with firebombing a furniture store over a consignment price dispute. The case was tried twice, but both times a jury couldn't come to a verdict on the matter. This led to the charges being dropped. Whether or not Smith firebombed the furniture store is up to you, because legally, he's not guilty. In fact, I only bring it up because it was his first run-in with the law. Something that I think is important to note, no matter innocence or guilt, as I have done with many others on this iceberg. By discussing someone's full legal history, it provides a better picture as to who they are as a person. As for Smith, he was a killer, because in 2011, Smith, along with 2 others, were charged with the murder of Marilio Ponce, who was beaten and shot to death in 2008. The murder of Ponce occurred due to a business deal gone wrong, a similar motive to the firebomb charges. The jury deadlocked in an 8-4 argument in favor of guilt. This led to a retrial, but while Smith awaited retrial, he was charged with 3 other murders. In 1999, 2 brothers, Kevin and Riley Nettles, were kidnapped by Smith, who was disguised as a police officer, where he then tortured and killed the siblings. Another man, Dennis Henderson, was kidnapped and stabbed as well. A judge found sufficient evidence for Smith to stand trial in all 4 murders he was accused of. Smith was convicted of all 4 murders and given 3 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. Donte Stallworth was a wide receiver in the NFL for a total of 10 years, where he was picked up by the Saints in the first round of the 2002 draft. Numerically, he was the 13th overall pick. In all, Stallworth scored a total of 35 touchdowns in his 10-year career. However, his career was marred when he struck and killed a pedestrian while driving. The victim was Mario Reyes, 59 years of age, who was just trying to catch a bus home from his shift. Stallworth claims that he flashed his headlights at Reyes in warning before he hit him with his vehicle. Stallworth went on to admit that he'd been drinking prior to the incident, and his blood alcohol level was 0.12, which is above the legal limit of 0.08. Stallworth received a 30-day jail sentence and was ordered to do 1,000 hours of community service upon conviction of DUI manslaughter. Stallworth was suspended from the 2009 NFL season without pay. A decent sentiment, except for the fact that he went on to play 4 more years in the league, making hundreds of thousands and even millions of dollars. Your loved one may be dead, but hey, when there's football to play, you can get a small prison sentence and only a suspension upon killing somebody. Now I get it. Felons in modern-day society have a hard time finding jobs after conviction. But we're not talking about someone with an average career who just happened to have a DUI. We're talking about an individual who willingly operated a vehicle while intoxicated and consequently killed somebody. Brandon Browner was drafted as a free agent to the Denver Broncos in 2005. Bronner scored himself a back-to-back Super Bowl win on two separate teams, as well as many other accolades during his time within the NFL. Playing as a cornerback, Bronner would later be a leader on the Seattle Seahawks' Legion of Boom, a defensive line that was quite infamous for its ability to turn games on their head. Despite being incredibly successful in the NFL, Bronner, like many others, had issues with crime. In 2017, Bronner was arrested for cocaine possession and being under the influence. In 2018, Bronner was arrested again for breaking and entering into a home. The home belonged to a woman he'd previously been in a relationship with. Bronner ultimately fled the scene after successfully stealing a Rolex watch. Reports state that after breaking into the house in order to steal the Rolex, Bronner had grabbed his former girlfriend, dragged her around the apartment, and attempted to smother her to death in her carpet. Police managed to apprehend Bronner 2 days later, where he was charged with attempted murder and child endangerment due to the fact that his ex-girlfriend's children were present during the crime. Because of this, Bronner was sentenced to 8 years in prison, where he will be eligible for parole in November of 2023. Henry Ruggs III played only 2 seasons with the NFL, after originally being drafted in 2020 to the Raiders. Due to his incredibly short career, it's hard to say whether Ruggs was significant in the sport of football or simply a washed-up college player. What can be said is that Ruggs made poor choices while in the NFL, like so many others. While driving under the influence, Ruggs struck and killed 23-year-old Tina Tintor and her dog Max. After rear-ending the unfortunate pair, both Tina and Max reportedly burned to death. I can only pray that the impact of the collision knocked both Max and Tina unconscious so that neither of them felt the excruciating pain of the tragedy. Following the accident, Ruggs refused to take a field sobriety test. However, a blood test taken as he was in the hospital following the collision revealed that his blood alcohol content was 0.161, which is twice the legal limit. Even though Ruggs chose to operate a vehicle which led to the slaughter of an innocent woman and her dog, Ruggs was assigned a 3 to 10 year sentence, as vehicular manslaughter is considered a misdemeanor. Ironically, former teammates of Ruggs in the NFL came out with statements stating that people make mistakes, and it isn't fair to drag him down for it. Or statements indicating that while they felt sorry for the victims and their family, they were going to support Ruggs through his difficult time. Now, I understand that Ruggs will have an incredible burden for the rest of his life, having to live with the fact that he killed someone and their beloved pet. But it's strange to me that many players and coaches in the NFL seemingly minimize the victims while coddling Ruggs. For instance, a statement made by Kadarius Toney read, "We young, everybody makes mistakes. He know he messed up, don't drag him for it." That's goofy to me. Of course, it's not my place to judge, but I find it difficult to sympathize with anyone who knowingly operates a car or any vehicle while drunk. Jovan Belcher was an undrafted free agent signed to the Kansas City Chiefs playing as a linebacker. He was relatively productive with the team, though not particularly outstanding in his statistics or career as a whole. Despite this, Belcher played in the NFL from 2009 to 2012. While relatively unknown in his career, Belcher became familiar with headlines only after his death, which was the result of a murder-suicide. After killing his 22-year-old girlfriend, Cassandra Perkins, Belcher drove to the Chiefs Stadium in distress, where he stepped out of his car, pointing a gun to his head. It's important to note that Cassandra and Belcher's deaths resulted from a heated argument where Belcher consequently shot Cassandra 9 times in front of his own mother and infant daughter. This was in part due to the large amount of alcohol in Belcher's system, paired with his escalated emotions from the argument. In the end, despite multiple people trying to talk Belcher down, and multiple officers eventually arriving on scene, Belcher shot himself in the head, ending his own life. This iceberg has come to an end. It is a tragic story and one that brings a lot of questions with it, such as why does crime permeate the NFL? Is it cultural? Is it related to social aspects? Or is it just a really strange coincidence? Well, I don't have the answer to those questions. I do know that many of the men in this iceberg who committed horrible and heinous crimes suffered from CTE. CTE is the result of multiple head injuries or impacts that jostle the brain, such as repeated concussions. CTE stands for chronic traumatic encephalopathy. The symptoms for this disease worsen over time and include social instability, impulsiveness, poor judgment, depression, and suicidality. The disease itself is still prominent in the NFL as the organization, coaches, and owners fight against advancements to protect their players and their brains. I know I was judgmental in many aspects of this iceberg, but I think The biggest tragedy here is that while the NFL failed the victims of its players, the NFL has also failed its players. It's a system of corruption that only cares about one thing: football. Player or not, victim or not, all that matters is who wins the Super Bowl and who makes the most money. In the end, I think that's one of the greatest tragedies in all of this. No matter how bad the crimes were, whether it was due to social upbringing, expectations, fame, or CTE, it all ties back into one organization: the NFL. America's most legalized and famous crime syndicate, built on the perpetuation of self sabotage and self destruction. That is going to be it for this video, guys. It was a bit of a longer one. It's going to be a pretty big pain in the butt to edit. So if you liked this and you want more content, please, please, please subscribe, hit a like. It is not easy to make these videos, and it is pretty draining doing this type of research. So help me out a little bit, give me some love, and I'll see all of you guys in the next video.